but I move back now to our paper speakers and to Professor Kathleen Stock. Kathleen Stock is a philosopher and writer. She was formerly Professor of Philosophy at the University of Sussex, and she resigned in October 2021 following attacks on her by colleagues as well as a student campaign. She has published academic works on aesthetics, fiction, imagination, and now writes on sex and gender identity as well as the nature of womanhood. Kathleen, you have the ears of the House.
Okay, well, thank you, Madam President, for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. I have no idea why I was invited, and I certainly didn't audition, as you'll probably see. But I also want to start by saying that I'm not going to address anything that's been said about me, even though I obviously disagree with it. It's within every speaker's right to say what they like, and that's fine by me. I'm going to actually address the question, which is there a right to offend? So I know, as you are all clever people at Cambridge, that you know that just because you have a right to do something doesn't mean it has to be a particularly good thing to do that thing all the time, and it certainly doesn't mean it's a moral obligation. So I'm not taking this motion to mean that you should always offend people or it's always good to offend people. We're talking about a freedom to offend people, and whether the freedom is the good thing, not the actual offending. So that's the first thing. That's what a right is. It's a freedom. So in a progressive society, you have the right to do all sorts of things that aren't particularly valuable and sometimes won't be very valuable at all. They will be positively harmful, but you have the right to do them because the right is supposed to be the valuable thing. So I'm taking it that this motion says that we should be free to offend people and the state should not punish us for it. Our rights to say offensive things should not be restricted. Now, I don't think, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think anyone seriously thinks that there should be no freedom to offend anyone ever, because, as we've already heard, there are many historical examples of perfectly benign things offending people massively at the time, and I'll just give you a few examples. We've heard some: believing the earth goes round the sun, Beethoven's Ninth, Lady Chatterley's lover, the thought of two men having sex with each other, the Sex Pistols swearing on television in 1976. Yes? Sorry,
adding to the list of offences is first speech.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, so people say offensive things. Every satirical joke that's ever been made has offended someone if it's been effective, because the whole point of satire is to mock irreverently that which people treat reverently. And it's also a paradoxical feature of offence that once some group is massively offended by X, then another group will be massively offended by them being offended. So the whole thing's going to get recursive quite quickly. And all this points to the fact that offence is cheap. It's a very cheap emotion. It's based on uncomfortable feelings in your body. You feel outraged. I'm feeling some of it right now. It comes quick. It's subcortical. You can't even control it, as has been mentioned already. So why would we ever try to control that which humanly is uncontrollable, which is the feelings of offence when you hear things that... Yes.
Someone said earlier, talk about it as an emotion, but we restrict a lot of things based on emotion. So just because it's an emotion, people can say that happiness or sadness or joy are equally as fickle and can be shaken up or subjective. But surely we have to have boundaries where we don't indulge in our happiness or be prudently melancholic way too much, because we understand that there's limits to these things that we should accept, especially on a social level. So if you don't even appreciate...
Okay, can I come back?
You can talk with anyone. In a public institution, there should be a restriction of what can be said.
All right, well, I think we can argue, so as I'm going to get to, society might restrict certain kinds of speech based on harm, and then you've got to argue what is harm, and you might come back to some subjective account of what harm is, but I'm not sure you have to. That's all I can say at this point. Right, so my point is offence is cheap. It's affected by your personal history, your sore points, your touchy points, your mood, whether you're drunk, whether you're tired, and it's also affected by social context, what your social surroundings say are the norms, the taboos, because we're social animals and we tend to get pulled into that. So in practice, I think thinking there's no right to offend is basically you can think of the most offensive thing possible and you think there should be no right to say that. And that's, what the opposition are doing, and even my side are doing, apparently. So if you think that, and I assume you do, because everyone that's offended always thinks they're right. I mean, that's a feature of the emotions. They tell you that you are right at the time, and then afterwards you calm down and you think, well, maybe I might not have been right. So we need to distinguish a few things as far as I'm concerned. Philosophically, just separate out some important concepts. The first is that unless you're a moral relativist, which I am not, being morally wrong is different from something seeming wrong to you right now. And I think offence as an emotion taps onto seeming wrong, not being wrong. Now, of course, it sometimes coincides because things that are really wrong seem wrong. So people get offended by things that are really wrong. I do see that. But they also come apart in the following way. What is actually wrong need not be offensive to anyone at the time in that context, and we can see that usually retrospectively, looking back in history. There's been plenty of things that now seem blindingly obviously wrong, that nobody in that context was offended by at the time, like anti-Semitism, frequently not seen as a problem, other kinds of racism. Sexism, for a very long time, was not seen as a problem. Yes? Well, some people have, but lots of people haven't. And if you're going to take a kind of general social position based on the society, sexism was not considered a massive problem in the 15th century, for instance. Okay, so that's the side of it that says what's actually wrong need not be offensive at the time, only retrospectively. But obviously, there's the other side, which is what is offensive might not actually be wrong. And we've already had some brilliant examples from my fellow speaker here and from over here that all sorts of morally progressive positions have been massively offensive to people at the time because that's the nature of a morally progressive position. It will force you to shift your thinking in a way that is going to be challenging to you. So the upshot of that is that since I've split it off as, I think, seeming offensive from being offensive, you don't even have to be a free speech absolutist to vote for this. Because, and I'm not a free speech absolutist, as it happens, this motion leaves it totally open that you can restrict speech on other grounds than offence. You can restrict it on genuine harm. And then you can discuss, as we have other people trying to do, what counts as genuinely harmful. And you can bring in evidence, and you can discuss that. And that's much better than just going for your feelings. Like, what do your feelings tell you is the thing to think here. So you can vote for this even if you think speech should be restricted. You just shouldn't think that speech should ever be restricted on the grounds of offence alone. You should also vote for this. Am I supposed to take one from you? I don't know. I'm nearly done. So as I've already indicated, I think that it's a positive value to have a right to offend, and that is not offence is good. That is the right to offend is good because every single moral improvement towards a just society has involved massive amounts of offence. And if we restrict offence, we effectively constrain the ways in which society can get more progressive, can get more just, and so on. And the final reason I want to commend this motion to you is that your generation, if most of you are undergraduates here, or certainly younger than me, is terrified of causing offence. You may not admit this. It's sort of even a taboo to admit that you're terrified of causing offence, because of course you're not. You're very moral people and you'd say what you think. But I don't think that's true. I think social media has made everybody very frightened of causing offence, of saying the right thing or the wrong thing. And that, as you know, is a problem. And I'm sure you know that, because I'm sure you sometimes have rebellious thoughts that you think would offend people if you could say them, but you still think you would quite like to be able to say them. And that's a free society, a healthy society, be one in which we could air these things. We could be resilient enough to take very, very strong criticism, and we'd survive. So, yes.
I just think I maybe agree with you to a certain extent, but a certain amount of reluctance is good. I'm an American. We think we can say everything. But British people
Apparently so.
Restraining yourself, isn't that to a certain extent good? Having that social restraint and not say anything that pops in your head like Americans.
Well, as I've already pointed out, yes, it's always good to be not like Americans, but I've already pointed out, I'm not saying that splurging your guts and being really offensive is good. I'm not saying keeping really quiet is good. I'm saying the right to say, to be offensive is good. And one of the reasons is that it allows for places where people who are very well educated and relatively privileged aren't terrified to express their heretical thoughts to each other. And I think heretical thoughts need to be discussed. So that is why I commend the motion to you.